to order. And we will begin with the roll call, starting with Ms. Blitzstein.
Mia Blitzstein, present.
Leah Mulhern, present.
Ross Whiting, present.
Jennifer Lohman, present.
So may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 15th meeting?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you so very much. And now we are turning the meeting over to Dr. Savage.
Good evening and welcome to our Educational Affairs meeting for November 2024. We're excited to have everyone here this evening, and thank you, Dr. Murphy, for actually presiding this evening as our facilitator. We always begin our meeting with looking at our essence, our true essence in terms of what it means to be a Cheltenham School District employee, resident, and student, really thinking about belonging, becoming, and excelling. And we also like to ground ourselves in our vision and our mission as well, knowing that we seek to belong, engage, and seek justice and to instill that in our students, and that we're particularly interested in making sure that we are resourcing our students appropriately so that we can provide inspiration for them to achieve academic excellence, and that we are creating an environment and a community that is equitable and inclusive for all of our children. So our agenda for this evening, first, we would like to actually go through a comprehensive plan process review. And the purpose of that is really to review the comprehensive planning process that the school district is currently engaged in per Pennsylvania Department of Education requirements. Then we are going to have some presentations this evening from our intermediate and each of our secondary schools. So we will hear from the principals of Elkins Park Intermediate School, Cedar Brook Middle School, and Cheltenham High School. And then we will revisit our academic calendar process. We have 2 new drafts to present to Educational Affairs this evening as we are continuing through the process of refining these drafts with the Academic Calendar Committee. So first, we're going to start with the comprehensive plan process review. And the purpose of this is really to just give the Educational Affairs Committee, as well as our community, a really high-level overview of what the comprehensive planning process is that is required by the Pennsylvania Department of Education and where we are in that cycle. The comprehensive planning process is required by the Pennsylvania Department of Education of all of the school entities that are in the Commonwealth. And the purpose is to really drive continuous improvement and to force school districts to think about leadership, teaching, and learning in particular ways and through particular frameworks. All of the school districts and school entities in Pennsylvania are assigned a phase. So each phase is then assigned a year or a cycle by which they are required to go through this process and submit a comprehensive plan to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Cheltenham School District is a phase 3 school district, which means that our comprehensive plan is due on March 31st of 2025. So March 31st of next year. We are within the current school year in terms of when we should be doing this planning process. So we wanted to make sure that we were updating our community as well as the Educational Affairs Committee around where we are in that process and what we are doing. The plan is actually due in a portal that the Pennsylvania Department of Education has created called the Future Ready Comprehensive Planning Portal, which we abbreviate FRCPP. And it's a planning framework. You actually have to put information into particular fields on particular screens before it lets you move through, and it dictates how you move through this process. So PDE has really defined what they think high-performing school entities and school districts do, and they have bucketed it into these 9 areas. So these common characteristics include having a clear and shared focus, having high standards and expectations, having effective leadership, having high levels of collaboration and communication, curriculum instruction and assessment that is aligned with standards, and for us, that means the PA core standards. Frequent monitoring of teaching and learning, focused professional development, supportive learning environments, and high levels of community and parent involvement. And I wanted to highlight these in particular because I think it's interesting that you have these two different processes that we go through as school districts. We have a strategic planning process, and then we have a separate state-required comprehensive planning process. We are lucky in that many of the pillars that we have already elevated in our strategic planning process are definitely high-performing characteristics that PDE has elevated as well. So we are seeing a nice mesh between our current strategic plan and the comprehensive planning process that we are currently going through. There were some important expectations as well that we wanted to make sure were embedded in our process. And these expectations are Pennsylvania Department of Education expectations. And things that we hold dear as well is making sure that key members of our stakeholder groups are aware and are participating in this planning process. Making sure that there's representative groups of stakeholders that can do certain pieces of the work. And then really thinking about how we communicate the decisions around the comprehensive planning process goals and solutions, and considering all of the data that is available to us in that process. So I think this is probably the most important slide in this section, because it gives you a sense of what we have planned and what we are currently doing, as well as what we will be doing with regards to this process. We have already assembled a steering committee, and that steering committee started meeting in September.
Jenny has her hand up, but I just want to make sure there's not a tech. No, okay, sorry. I was just worried there was something was wrong.
All good, sorry.
So in September, we pulled together a steering committee. The Pennsylvania Department of Education actually has a full template of who they would like to be on this steering committee. So we actually named a number of committee members based upon the stakeholders that PD wants us to have on this committee. And we have met multiple times already. In September, we sent invitations out, and we had our first committee meeting where we actually delved deeply into the Future Ready Index. And we took a look at all of the Future Ready Index data for our schools across time. And we had prepared for our committee, who met via Zoom and in breakout rooms, a survey to do through Google Forms where they could actually elevate strengths and weaknesses and challenges that they saw in the data. Then we came back together in October, and we actually had our second committee meeting where we looked at finishing the Future Ready Index data, and we also looked at local assessments that we had data for. So we looked at the data that we had for our CDTs, for example, for IXL. We looked at multiple measures of data as required by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And in our third meeting, which we had earlier this month, we actually had the committee come back together and take a look at the data, the strengths and the challenges that were elevated by the data, and really begin to focus what they thought the goals should be for the school district. We're in the process of refining those goals so that we can then begin the planning phase. We thought it was important for the goals to come out of the steering committee itself. But here within Central Admin, we'll be meeting to put together the action plans that go with those particular goals. Then in December, we already have scheduled a number of meetings around additional portions of the plan that have to be completed, including our induction plan, our professional development plan, and our gifted committee. So there are planned meetings for those subcommittees as well. And we will be bringing all of that information together so that we can actually draft the plan and bring it back to Educational Affairs in January, where we will discuss in full for the entire meeting just the comprehensive plan. But we wanted to make sure that everyone had a preview of what the process is and that people were aware of what was actually happening. In February, we will have a public inspection period as required by state law, and the full board will be able to vote on the comprehensive plan in March, which is required prior to us submitting it to the state, so we will be timely. So I will pause there. Do you have any questions about that process? Questions? All right, I do want to give a particular shout out to Heather Scriven and Tracy Horn, who work here with us at at the central administration offices. They have actually taken on this work and spearheading some of the logistics in this process. They have collected up the data and made it digestible for our steering committee, and they have put together all of the decks and the forms. They have been doing a fantastic and stupendous job just leading us through this process. So I did want to actually elevate them and give them their flowers, though they're not here. All right. So next, we will actually be calling the principals of our intermediate schools and our 2 secondary schools to the table one at a time. But prior to doing that, I just wanted to take you back through the slides that we shared in October in preparation for the elementary school principals meeting when they shared their data and their statewide targets. And just as a reminder, these performance goals actually come from the state of Pennsylvania, and they have been set because the U.S. Department of Education requires the state to report certain indicators and categories, and the state therefore has set goals as well, so that we could then report these 12 indicators at the district level back up to the state, because Pennsylvania has chosen to report 12 different indicators. So you can see here that these are the statewide performance goals, and these are the goals that the state has set for all of the schools in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The interim target is where they expect us to be at the end of this school year. The long-term target is their long-term goal and where they expect us to be in 2033. So you can see in ELA, which is English Language Arts, our interim goal for this year in terms of student proficiency is 71.5%. In terms of mathematics, it's 57.6%, and for science, it's 74.2%. And then the longer term goal you see is 81.1%, 71.8%, and 83% in English Language Arts, mathematics, and science, respectively. And this you can see is just the disaggregated statewide data in terms of where the state has set its expectations for particular subgroups of students. And you can see over time as well, it elevates for us. You can see the column that says student groups, where it is highlighted by red. It says all student groups, and then it goes through different subgroups of students that the state actually pays particular attention to. And then you can see the measures of interim progress that are expected for each of those student subgroups in 2025. That 71.5% that we elevated actually was for all student groups. You can see it's disaggregated by other groups as well. But what we as a district have actually done is taken those state performance targets and developed our own school performance targets, because we took where we are in terms of a baseline, and we have created our own interim targets so that we are scaling up to expectation over time. So I will pause there. Do we have any questions before I invite Interim Principal Nelson to the table? Principal Nelson? So we have Principal Nelson with us this evening, and she is going to, in similar fashion to what we saw in October, present her action plan around her school's interim targets and her school district targets, as well as her CSI plan. And the CSI plan being our continuous school improvement plan. Knowing too that Principal Nelson was called to this endeavor as interim principal. Just this year. We are very glad that she's here joining us and that she was willing to step into this role, and she's going to speak more about what she is doing with her school team.
So I'm going to ask if we can take a look at the ELA numbers and then move to the math, because then what I have to speak to actually really spans both, so I don't want to take up the time. So you can see where our numbers and our targets are for 5th grade and 6th grade PSSA scores for ELA. And then our numbers are mapped, thank you. And now I can speak to, there are a few things on here that I want to highlight. You can see the full list. To start, we've had a focus this school year, not with just academic supports, but even with our PBIS positive behavior supports and things in paring down so that we can be really precise and consistent with the work that we're doing instead of being spread too thin. And so that's been a big focus for us. So our list is a little shorter than it has been in past years, but that was intentional because we really wanted to have an intense focus on a smaller amount of things. So the first thing that I'll highlight is that we have a new walkthrough process for monitoring small group instruction. I always like to hand it out, and so what this cycle allows us to do is over the course of 2 weeks, we have over the course of 2 weeks, we have a cluster of teachers that we, and when I say we, I mean the administrative team, that we are all focusing on. And we spend 2 full weeks doing our walkthrough observations on that one cluster of teachers. So instead of spreading ourselves thin across, 14, 15, 16 teachers a week, we have the same 7 for 2 weeks. And so it allows us to spend really good quality time in the classrooms and really getting to see what's happening, where supports may be needed, the things that we're celebrating, which we're then actually transitioning into peer walks so that they can learn from each other. So this is something that was new that we started this fall so that we can really strengthen our small group instruction. The district has a new screening tool, Fast Bridge, that we're getting additional data from, and so we're building that into our data discussion. We have a Beyond Hours tutoring program where we have Elkins Park teachers who are offering tutoring either before school or after school, so we're able to better support students and strengthening their needs. We have been focusing with our early dismissal Wednesdays time on maximizing our win period, and some of that is coming from that small group instruction coaching time, and really focusing on our MTSS. All of these things are in place so that we can meet students where they are before they get too far down the line and maybe wind up in needing even deeper needs. So we're trying to make sure that we can meet their needs in the classroom before it extends beyond that. Our SPM, that the teachers, have to develop each year are aligned to our overall building goals. So every teacher is working towards what our building goal is. That's something that we did last year and continued this school year. Another thing that we're really excited about is that our schedule this year allowed for a building support block with our Encore teachers. And so our Encore teachers are in the midst of planning for, with the help of our interventionists and with our classroom teacher recommendations, pulling students for a 25-minute small group period each day where they'll lean into the subject matter that they teach. So if you're a PE teacher, you might be doing math facts and students are running around the gym finding the facts and things. For the art teachers, they may be, painting the numbers and then looking and making collages with things that relate to numbers and things. So we really want, we've got Mr. Moran, everybody knows Mr. Moran and his drums, they may be drumming to the beat and learning and working on the skills that they need some support in. So that's going to be an additional level of support for students and a different way for them to learn and hopefully to engage them better. And so we're really excited. And then also we're doing that on a 6-day cycle. And so on the 6th day, it is actually a space of reward for students who, it doesn't matter what their academic needs are, but they get to kind of go down and do some learning in a different setting. So we're really excited about that. Our schedule also allowed for additional push-in support time for our Title I teachers and our challenge teachers. Our MTSS program this year, we've extended to include challenge and making sure that we're meeting students who need, more advanced work, that we're meeting those needs as well. And so our Title I and challenge teachers are able to push into the classrooms where their students are the basic supports to give them some extra support. And then something that came out of this discussion in preparation for this meeting, we were meeting with Dr. Riley and with Ms. Ferraro, and we started talking about data in just a different way with our interventionists and looking at what are the trends that we're seeing, what is it like for the 4th to 5th grade transition? Is it cohorts of students that are struggling in different spaces, or is it the transition that is the struggle? And so it says upcoming because this came out of that conversation, so we haven't started it yet, but we have a plan for some data conversations to just kind of look at that transition from 4th to 5th grade and what that means for our students. And so that's what we're doing to work on getting our scores up to that target. And then last but not least, so for our CSI plan, I'll start with, we had to do a pivot. Sorry, Dr. Pimentel. We had to do a pivot because the work that we did in the summertime, our goal at that time was around small group instruction, and so, you know, one of the big pieces in the root cause analysis was around student behavior and disruptive behavior. But for those of you all that either were watching or at the board meeting last week, you got to see our spectacular behavior data, things that we started putting into place right away at the start of the school year. You know, things are really flourishing, and so that was not the concern this year, and so we kind of had to pivot to the next thing. And so we were looking at a decrease in our CDT data. And so we came up with a goal to work on increasing our students scoring proficient or advanced on the PSSAs. And so, you know, and a lot of that is happening through the things that you saw on the slide, you know, prior, you know, really driving that consistent small group instruction, really strong small group instruction. You know, I don't want to read this whole slide to you, but you can see, you know, we're really looking to strengthen our win period, all of those things that we know are really, really impactful to improving student learning. And so I'll kind of take a pause there for a second and see if anyone has any questions.
Not a question, but I just kudos to all the work that you've done to improve the culture and student behavior and needing to move on to a different goal. I mean, to me, that's
Good thing to know. Good.
amazing.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we would like to call Principal Metcalf so that he can speak to his internal targets and plan.
Good evening. Good evening. How's everybody doing?
Thank you.
Is that both English on both sides?
Say that again?
Is that also English on the other?
Yeah, this is your PSA. There you go.
All right. So we actually are very pleased with how our scores went. Looking at our past data with 7th and 8th grade, it's not on the screen for you to see, but typically what happens, children come to Elkins Park and, you know, culture is a big thing for us at Cedarbrook. And so really getting children acclimated to our culture, our 7th grade scores typically are not as high as the following year, right? So kids come in 7th grade, they may score 45%, but when they go to 8th grade, their scores dramatically increase, right? And I think that's really just, it's part of the process of children maturing and coming in, us trying to really ensure that we have a positive school culture. A lot of our goals evolve around reducing student discipline, fights, things of that nature. So we were actually really pleased with looking at our 7th grade scores. In addition to that, our 8th grade scholars, I will definitely say, given the group that we have, you get different groups of children from year to year, right? And we were actually pleased with, they made growth as well from 7th grade to 8th grade. So those are some things we were proud of as far as our scores are concerned. Reaching those targets, what we're focused on, as always, analyzing student data. We obviously have our standardized test data, our PSSAs, the CDT, which we're actually shifting away from. We did do a first round of CDT data this year. Anytime we do, you know, we have some type of standardized test or we do some large longitudinal testing, we like to always have a data protocol. So our teachers go through and dig through the data. They have protocols in which they're identifying weak areas of our scholars. In addition to that, looking at where we can grow at also. That also kind of gets wrapped up into our PLC time, in which our teachers are working on common assessments. All of our common assessments are completed for our entire school for our core subjects. They are shifting, however, because of science and still standards and things of that nature. The other area that I would also highlight with regards to just our common assessments is part of the PLC time is used to not just create, fixed, analyze, but also when they analyze that data, they're looking at questions where collectively groups of children maybe didn't perform well, right? And so they might see that, hey, well, maybe we didn't teach this well. And they'll go back to a drawing board and kind of do a reteaching or something of the sort to try to make sure we do hit that standard or whatever that question was based on the data. Other areas that we've done this year or things that we focused on this year, we have a new book into literature. The assessments are much more aligned to standardized testing. Our teachers actually really like the book. I mean, last year they'd spent a whole year going between two different texts, and they're really, really pleased with what they chose. So that's a very big for them, as you'll see in the continuous school improvement plan, them wanting more say in what's happening at Cedarbrook is it happened there, right? We're putting our money where our mouth is. Obviously continuing to focus on our cultural relevant novels. Last year we had a lot of meetings around what books we need to shift. And so we added They Call Us Enemy and also I Am Malala. Those were just two books that we really were focused on. And then we started our series of the Holocaust survivors. And so we added the Diary of Anne Frank, which used to be a part of our book collection. It got shifted out, and I think they were doing it at the high school, and then something happened there. So we brought it back to Cedarbrook. So those are areas that we're focused on. And our teachers spent a lot of time last year planning to get those, just so we could have the right skills matching with the books that they were reading. We also are continuing our book club approach to support grammar comprehension and certain focus skills. As we looked at our data, looked at our PVAS data, I would say over the last 3 years, we saw different changes, with our data, right? 1 year we had, so in the quintiles, they're broken up into 5. 1 year we had exceptionally great growth within our, well, actually, let me backtrack. We had more growth, higher growth in our last 2 quintiles, meaning our children performed extremely well. That's kind of dropped off a little bit based on some of the things we've done with WIN, where it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we saw great growth with our children who perform lower, right? I'm a proponent, if we don't move the kids at the bottom, you won't move the school, right? But trying to get a good mix of both of those is us kind of going back to what we did prior, which was having more direct instruction during our WIN classes, right? That got us success across the board, not necessarily everything we wanted in our lower quintiles. However, we saw the growth continuing at the top, and we had slim growth at the bottom, right? And so with the addition of that, and then us also having the small group instructional models for our actual WIN classes, we hope that the combination of both of those will have everybody meeting the goals that they were set to meet. So other things we've done in English class, Introduction to Waggle. It's a self-directed program. It's almost like IXL, so it's English self-directed. That is just to help support scholars around grammar. More authentic writing. So I'll be honest, because the TDA was on the PSSA, we're like TDA. But when we look at what other schools are doing, right? How do we compete with the best schools or schools that we consider might be the best, right? The private schools out there, they're doing way more authentic writing. So again, this year we switched that up. It could have an impact on our test scores around text content analysis, but looking again, like what's going to be best for our children, how do we ensure they're competing with everybody else out there? More authentic writing is where we're trying to go. So we are doing that this year. And the writing, obviously, we're focusing on now also will include narrative, persuasive, argumentative, as well as the TDA. And then one of the shifts we did for social studies this year, we are introducing refugee for 7th grade. And then we added a nonfiction book for 8th grade social studies, which is Raise Your Voice. So trying to incorporate social studies, which is informational text, but it's an English class as far as we're concerned, right? And trying to ensure that our social teachers are also reinforcing a lot of the skills that come out of an English class. And for math, you will see a lot of things we're doing because they're school-wide things that we're doing across the board. Our scores, I'm gonna be honest, looking at our overall data of math, what our scores are, they don't look good, especially for a former math teacher. But the uniqueness of this thing is I got an email from US Newsweek magazine, and we're like the top 25% of the state, right? So I guess that's good, but at the same time, I'm not really happy with it. So I'll just say that. So, but it is what it is, right? So looking at just the perspective of where other schools are also still struggling with math. So obviously still we're doing our benchmark protocols. We've changed things up with FastBridge, and this will also speak to English as well, which around our SVM. So FastBridge is unique. It's new, but we've really been diving into it. It gives children a goal at the end of the year, right? So they take a fall, winter, spring benchmark. And so we kind of switched, we were trying to figure out what we we're going to do for our SPM data. And we kind of switched it to FastBridge and then moving it to where children have to meet their goals, right? And so holding the teachers accountable for them, ensuring a certain percentage of those children meet their goals. Obviously, we want 100%, but also just trying to push and stretch children in different ways so they can get there. Again, using our PLC time as always. Again, in math, I think it's a little bit different because they're looking at assessments much more much more rapidly or frequently than English. And then again, with our WIN, more direct instruction, we found that that's what really gave us support across the board. We do have small group instruction where the WIN classes only have about 8 kids, right? So we have 4 math classes like that where they really are going like reteaching skills. They're doing a little pre-teaching and then they're just doing some reassessment at times as well. Our scholars, were up in arms about IXL. They really, they kind of rage out sometimes on IXL, which is, it's okay, but I met with some scholars last year and they were concerned just about the amount of time they were spending IXL. So we added some things which you'll see in the continuous school improvement plan to kind of support them as well as our teachers, right? And expanding what we do in the school. So another couple areas so for math, during our assessments, I think this has actually increased the efficacy of our work and what children are showing, right? One of the areas that you'll see on the CSI plan, parents want to see more challenging work. Like, how do you see the work, right? And so for math for the past 2 years now, children actually, we give them a piece of paper, they have to demonstrate their work, like it's a have to moment, right? And so they either have to write out how they got their answers or demonstrate the steps. And that's for all of our math classes at this point. And that really helps them because honestly, PSSA, it's online now, right? You can easily just click a button and go right through, right? So we're hoping that this transfers over into the PSSA where children, because we're kind of making some part of the math culture, they're doing this. And so when we have the PSSA, they'll be dedicated to actually doing that as well. So we've been practicing that with our CDT and with our FastBridge, as well as all of our common assessments. For some of our other classes, they have a scripted iReady intervention for academic support, and that's been working well. It actually supports the teachers a little bit with having something planned for them, right? And so all they need to do is do like small modifications to support children in the classroom. This year, we're actually going to be doing a midterm and final, so it's something that we're going to be just evaluating to see how it goes this year, to see how our scholars are doing on more longitudinal tests that are covering more material. And then open-ended responses. So we've been doing that to ensure they're reflecting real world scenarios on all of our tests because we want to make sure that it's kind of resembling what it should be resembling, right? When they go out into the real world, it's not just drill and kill, but also what they're going to see on the PSSAs. All right, and for science, I'll say this, we're doing everything we're doing in the other places. The largest thing that's changing here, right? And I would say the impact of Elkins Park coming to Cedar Brook soon, right, is something that we really wanted to get in front of, right? So our last PD that we had, Elkins Park 6th grade science teachers were with 7th and 8th grade science teachers at Cedar Brook, and really just talking about the STEEL standards, right? We have to have a plan aligned from 6 to 8. It's going to take a while to get there. And so starting now was definitely the best time to ensure we're ahead of it, right? So taking all the standards that you have to do and breaking them out into, all right, this is what we'll do in 6th grade, just creating that plan 6 through 8, right? So that was really important. I would say that's probably one of the most important things that we are working on to date. And so the PLCs are very much impacted by the STEEL standards. That's all they're focused on right now. They haven't had as much time to go back and look at common assessments per se and kind of see, hey, what areas are we doing well or not, because the STEEL standards are here. And so that's an area that, once we get that down, they're actually creating the lessons. We're actually doing 6th grade lessons right now, as well as 7th and 8th grade, just to support the 6th grade teachers when they do come over, just so we're ready and we have a full fledged program. The other thing I think my science teachers, they love real world experiments, right? And making sure they're linking concrete to abstract. And so the work that they do around there, where children are also making like hot air balloons and they're timing things. I mean, it's just, they're incorporating a lot of other standards and other core subjects into their classrooms. The last thing I will say, Omar Rose and Sean Quenzer are amazing, right? They are our 2 STEM teachers. If you have a chance to come over and just watch some of the things that they're doing, you'll see Omar like doing a hovercraft that the kids made going down the street. And then Sean with regards to what we're doing around esports. I mean, esports is taking off like crazy, and the plans we have for it, are really going to, I think, put us on the map as a middle school. And yeah, we've been doing a lot of work just connecting there. So. All right. So for our CSI plan, I will first start over here where our summary is. So we really wanted to utilize the data that we received from the surveys, and then we wanted to link those to the strategic plan, right? Because if it's not like the strategic plan, then what are we doing it for? And so the areas that we received from our surveys was, we went scholars, we went teachers, and parents, right? So our scholars desire more choice in what they're learning. That was when we kind of met and spoke more about what they're doing in WIN class. Scholars know the need for better peer relations. And so we did some implementation of new things, which we'll go over in a second. Parents were seeking more respectful peer relations to support scholars' social needs. Parents' expectations of more visible and rigorous higher quality work from their children. I'll be honest, that's a hard one because we don't necessarily send tests home because they're common assessments, right? So trying to figure out what does authentic work look like that we can send home that demonstrates rigor is, something that we're working on now. There's definitely rigor happening in our classrooms, but sometimes it doesn't go home. And so, we have a homework policy and all these other things, so they don't always get a chance to see everything. So nights like this, or days like this, the last 3 days, where parents come in, or we have back to school night, one of the biggest things we've done is, as far as as we go to the next slide, you'll see our beautification process, hanging up authentic work with authentic feedback, right? That's one of the things we've been doing around our school. Last thing, teachers believe that a lack of shared decision-making compromises their ability to engage with scholars in learning, right? And so trying to provide teachers with more say, right? And more opportunities to be a part of our leadership that's going on as one of our largest goals, and putting our action plans together. So you can go back just one. Thanks. Yep. All right, so there you have our strategic plans, right? So social, emotional, and mental health. Things we introduced this year, town halls on early dismissal Wednesdays, right? This is a part of our schedule. So every time we have an early dismissal Wednesday, we have a town hall. They flip-flop, they're like 2 a month. So 7th grade has the first one, 8th grade has the second one. And so when 7th grade's in town hall, 8th grade scholars, they're in WIN, and we're doing a social emotional learning lesson, right? So this has been something that has really been a part of our culture now this entire school year. If calendars do switch, we'll look to still include this as part of our day because we think it's really important in building culture. Some of the areas that we've covered, vaping, bullying, we brought in agencies to talk about vaping with our children. We brought in things, people to talk about bullying. Suicide prevention was our latest one for 7th grade. And then just doing intervention review of data and other things that we're doing. So as it says there, the opposite grade switch. The other area for our strategic plan was teaching and learning. With our WIN, we revised our WIN schedule to support academic rigor with more reteaching and enrichment opportunities. So we literally last Wednesday, whenever we had the early dismissal Wednesday, we had small group sessions of teachers set up to, go to different sessions. So we had one on special education and utilizing SCIs in the classroom. One was on WIN and what we're going to be doing as far as changes. And the other one was around lunch and learn and how, if there needs to be something done or made better, to support our school. We have our infrastructure and facilities and finance, again, connecting to the strategic plan. We began the process. If you come into our school, you will see our Wildcat Cafe. We have plants, we have artwork up, and really trying to get artwork around the entire school is something we're really trying to do. Our next phase of artwork is going to be around our school performances and plays and things like that. And that'll go around the back of the school and then our sports. You can go to the drop down slide. Thank you. Climate and culture for student success. So our lunch and learn has been, it's a hit. We've had conversation around, do we change it? And really, we're not looking to change it. I think the children would love to have it. Like we get questioned all the time. Hey, why didn't we have lunch and learn last Friday? Well, it's really every other Friday if you've been paying attention, right? And so we normally have had it on the same week of early dismissal Wednesdays, but the teacher's like, look, that's a lot, the early dismissal and then that. So we switched it to the week after. And I'll be honest, nothing but positive feedback from our scholars, nothing but positive. At our lunch, I'm trying to figure out what else can we do to make it better, and it's really, there was no feedback, right? Everything is great. I'll be honest, if we talk about teacher attendance, it is amazing on that Friday we have it, because I think everyone is looking forward to doing it. The teachers, the children, I mean, everyone is. And so that's really had a lot of buy-in. And so we're putting a survey out to children now to see what other type of activities they would like. There is an academic component as well, right? Children who have a D or lower, you have to do an academic component to get your grades up. And then when we have a switch over from one mark to the next, everybody can participate, right? Because it's like a grade changeover. So no one's necessarily in a bad position academically. And then for diversity, equity, belonging, inclusion, our advocacy for all. If you haven't been to one of these, I email me if you want to come. We meet with every single child. You can be a part of it in the entire school. And we have a conversation. It's a scripted conversation. We, type in the data. It's something it's really just getting the voice of our children, which we, continuously try to do over and over again in different ways. And then this year we also create a Scholar of the Month. We have our Roar Awards, which is more, it involves many more scholars that are receiving awards, and then we narrowed it down also to Scholar of the Month this year. SMART goals, increase overall scholar engagement and agency in our school by revising our intervention program, which is what we did. So we're really looking at our data from our surveys. And so we're trying to increase our survey points there by 0.3 points. And then obviously we want to continuously improve academically. I think it's 3 points of our goals for math and English, but we're looking to obviously do more than that, right? It is difficult to move children academically with test scores, standardized testing scores, because you have a lot of factors taking place, right? I think at first, I would say initially it would be our children didn't have as much buy-in, that we're not the highest performing, right? But there's been kind of like a shift. We're getting a lot more children who are in our upper level academic classes who are like, I don't want to take it, I don't want to do it, and we have parents also chiming in, same thing. So trying to ensure that all of our scholars have the buy-in is the reason why we're doing the AFAs, right? The reason why we're putting letters out to parents, encouraging them to encourage their scholars to do their very best, and really just creating that community around the fact that whatever we do, we always do our best, right? Yeah, it might take long, we might be upset by it, but we always do our best. And then our method of monitoring are some of the, I don't want to say basic, but some of the more obvious things that we do throughout the school, from observations to our MTSS meetings, to our PBIS meetings, benchmark protocols. We do a bi-weekly DNF report. I will definitely say lunch and learn. We had our first DNF report, probably had like 300 kids that had at least one D or an F. And after we put the D, no lower than a D into effect, it went to like 80. So it definitely is having an academic impact on our children as well as far as them work completion, right? Which is important. And so I think that's kind of supporting our school as well from an academic standpoint. That's it. Any questions?
Not so much a question, just a comment or a couple of comments. Thank you. Excited, a few things just that I'm excited to see, different kinds of writing, understanding, yeah, they're not on the PSSAs, but they need to know how to do all those kinds of writing. So excited about that. Having non-text or informational text and social studies sounds awesome to me. And I think anytime that I hear, because this is the way that I learn best, is when like my subjects are kind of crossing and I have the overlap, and I think I'm probably not the only person that learns really well that way. So I think that's exciting. And as someone who has a child at Cedar Brook, I can say the lunch and learn, they love it. Like it's giving them a time, because it's very different than at the high school. It's a complete, they're younger kids, it's a completely different thing. And I think that they're connecting with teachers in a great way. And I think that's awesome for all kids to continue to build that relationship outside of an academic space. So
there were programs I was like, nobody's gonna sign up. It was like changing a flat tire, right? Do that. But we have
really want to? That's awesome.
15
my
children
kid just
sign up.
walks around the track with the teachers.
Yep.
So, walk and talk, and they just want to chat. And
so the teachers have been really
and move, and it's like recess.
But they've been really creative. Ensuring that we have programming. I'll call them instruction, right? They're still learning, right? Absolutely. From crocheting, sewing, we're cooking, a number of different activities that go beyond, what we normally do as far as our instructional program. And that's really the connections for our children. So. And they have definitely, it's definitely increased the student-teacher connection. Like I said, the attendance is way up for teachers on those Fridays. So, maybe we'll do it every Friday, but,
I talked to people, I think after the first week, happened to see them at an event and they were raving about it. So like, I think it really is, everyone seems to have bought in.
yeah. And keeping the novelty, I think, is the best thing, every day, I think, would drive us crazy. The lunches, our cafeteria wasn't necessarily built for the amount of children they have to eat, so that's why we created different spaces. But when you have some rambunctious seventh graders, it's a little, not everybody's happy watching the kids, right? Lunch is a little hectic in the lunchroom. Where I'm at in the auditorium in our Wildcat Cafe, it's a different environment, right? So everybody's not trying to get lunch necessarily. So it's very different.
Now, before you move to every Friday, I have to count. I know how many hours we need. Right?
We're covered, I promise.
Okay.
Got the lighting.
Sure.
Tires on.
So student voice can be challenging to include because you want to make sure you're providing an experience in which you're listening to them and providing feedback and being responsive to it. I'm really interested in the advocacy for all program. Can you talk a little bit more about how you use that data for what that looks like to give the feedback back to the students so that you're using it?
Right. So we have a script of questions, right?
Yeah.
One of the questions talks about if you tried your best on, let's say the CDT, right? Because we're really trying to gauge whether or not children are putting in their effort, right?
Right.
And so sometimes, for me, that conversation, if they say no, it turns into a bunch of different questions that are not on the script.
Right.
But and afterwards, loop back around once we have all that data, is talking to the children about stuff that we, kind of uncovered from there, and we kind of do it in a celebratory thing.
Yeah.
Because we don't want children to feel like they're being penalized for being honest, right? Because then they
Sure.
won't tell the truth at all. But those conversations continue when we have our town halls. They blend into, again, as young people, it's important that we put forth effort in everything we do, right? Reviewing data with our children is a must, right? So we have data, I'm trying to create a school-wide expectation where data walls are up in every single school or every single classroom. They're up in quite a few, I would definitely say our math teachers for sure and our English teachers have data walls up in their rooms. But trying to help children understand and be responsible for their own data is like kind of how we feed that back around. So during our town halls where they will receive most of their feedback, and really having those conversations with them during that time, right? Because Craig might be doing this, Craig might not get the same conversation as Siobhan, would get,
Right.
And so that conversation of the encouragement right there and every single child getting it, because there's some children who are quiet and say nothing.
Mhm.
Throughout the entire school year, we didn't do this. They would never have had interaction with the principal, the vice principals, the counselors, other people that, care about our children that want to come into the school and also participate in this opportunity. So.
Do you use that in your MTSS system at all?
No, because I think that's authentic, right? From a
Right.
whole different perspective, right? And
Yeah.
we don't want to blend that with MTSS.
Yeah.
MTSS, because we use Linkit, to kind of support what our children, what their needs are, right? And so we're using some of our systems to ensure that work is really based on what's happening in the classroom. I wouldn't want to do that to our children because I think they found out, right?
Sure, it's trust.
Then, yeah, and breaking that trust would not be a good thing for our scholars.
Yeah, it struck me that it's universal, right? You've got this kind of universal touch point to every kid where you get to individualize and target the instruction to the individual debts of the student, the educational debts of the student, rather than, and that struck me as okay, well, what's the synergy with that in our MTSS system and tiering kids out both socially, emotionally, and academically as well. So, but this seems like more of an opportunity to build trust individually. Yes, okay, yeah, that's cool. Thank you for sharing. Jenny had
She
a.
had to go.
Yeah,
Oh,
she had she has to get to go.
One question. With the Scholar of the Month, what kind of criteria goes into recognizing those scholars?
Right. So we base it on the rural. So the rural rewards are based on respect, advocacy, all those things, achievement. And the Scholar Month is also, but it's a little more detailed, right? So it'll be, all right, well, this month, the math teachers do it. We just did ours for the administrators. So it's still based on the ROAR criteria. However, it's different groups now trying to narrow it down, to like 2 or 3 children that you might have or that you recognize. Yo, studio.
I know, keeps moving.
I mean, I can go in deeper if y'all want. I can talk about all this for hours. I mean, trust me, it's all right here.
We're just watching like the keeps like.
Dr.
What
Hammond.
are you doing Thursday?
Yes. Okay.
All right,
Thank you
guys.
so much for
I
listening.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Principal Hammond.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Don't worry, I yielded about 5 minutes of my time to Mr. So when I was given our data of the 23-24 performance, just as Mr. Metcalf stated, it didn't look good to me. It was kind of upsetting. And, but I did look at what was presented here last year with Jimmy. And you'll see that what our numbers were for the 22-23 year and the targets that were set, and that we did make growth and meet those targets. Literature pretty much tying it at a 61.8 with the 62 that was set. So we are moving in the right direction. And it did make me a little bit better looking at these numbers, because that is why I came to the district. But still seeing these numbers, it's why I want to continue doing the work that I'm doing. But if we go ahead to the next slide, there's a couple areas, especially coming in as an interim, that I really want to address. When we look at our perception data, a lot of it from teachers was even themselves saying, being held accountable and getting that instructional support from their administrative team. So we are working with our teachers, making sure we actually spent a lot of time this year with PD on building common assessments, making sure that their PLC groups are reviewing data to address with the students. They are using their time to fill out the tier 1 interventions. Ms. German has been coming over. I probably said it wrong, and I apologize.
It's okay.
Coming over and making sure that they're getting the support they need to fill out their tier 1 checklist so that our MTSS process can proactively catch kids. We're getting more in the classrooms and having those follow-up meetings and conversations with teachers around their instruction. The MTSS process last year was probably, I would say, it was really the first year of kicking off MTSS in the high school. And we completely have revamped that process and structured it to the point where we're proactively getting our kids and using that intervention manager. I'm also creating weekly DNF reports for my admin team so that we're not getting kids slipping through the radar and finding out after the fact, these kids had D's and F's and nobody reported that, no one communicated that. I'm also been sending those emails to families that, your child has a DNF in this class, or this class. These are some of the supports that we have in place for you to take advantage of. And so just getting that information, and then I tell my staff, just because I'm sending it, that doesn't stop you from doing your part of sending that communication. This is just my piece of sending that communication. So making sure that we're all communicating, because we're only going to improve this if we're working together. So we need that partnership with family and the school. If you can go to the next slide. The other big area was lunch and learn. Needed a lot of structure. There really wasn't structure with lunch and learn. It was a time that was designed to provide support during the school day for our students. And we put structures into place, and we're now seeing that we need to make another couple changes to provide more structure during that time so that we're maximizing the supports that we're giving our students and ensuring that people have a safe learning environment so that they can thrive. We have also, so that has been the more in-school support part. We've also brought back the after-school homework club, and we have, thanks to Ms. Savage and Epic, we also have Arcadia tutors in addition to our teachers that are at the school that are providing supports for our students after school that need assistance. We have also really vamped up our mentoring programs. We have one for males, about 18 students. It's led with Dr. Horsey and Chris Pender, and they're meeting during lunch and learn time. We also have a women's group that's led by a former graduate, actually, and Michelle Horsey. And they have about 21 females that are coming on Saturdays and working together. Then we also, with one of our new assistant principals and our new mental health and wellness counselor, have group sessions that are running during lunch and learn for students. If we don't fix that culture piece, that climate, we're not going to really make a lot of changes in the high school, no matter how much money you guys put at us. If we don't fix those things, our numbers are going to stay stale. So we have to really take that drive in that. So to me, those are short-term fixes to improve our numbers. Long-term, we are looking at our math materials and reviewing all of that to see what we're using in the classroom so that we can keep things going instructionally and smoothly from Cedarbrook to the high school and throughout their high school career. With Steels, I believe it was last year, you guys approved an environmental engineering course so that we could revamp to match the new standards and start offering environmental science in 9th grade and then biology in 10th grade. So we're still continuing on the revamping of that course or the structuring of that course so that when we roll that out, it will be ready to go and that, we can continue to strengthen our science program at the high school. If go to the next slide, in terms of our CSI plan, again, it really comes down to climate and culture for me. And in fact, I just had a conversation with a parent today during the conferences that just randomly happened. But the brand, the message that is in the community, we have to address it. And we need to intentionally improve the environment in the high school and get the positive message out. And so our CSI plan was fixing and improving our PBIS program for the most part. But overall, you saw students and staff did not feel connected to the building. And that was impacting attendance and academic success. You also had a negative perception of our school image. So I have been very intentional on improving our culture within the building from staff to staff, staff to students, student to student. If you walk our building today, it is a completely different environment in terms of vaping. I've been very strict on that. I have also brought in a speaker to speak with our parents about vaping and a speaker that spoke with all of our students about vaping. We'll also bring a speaker back later in the year because the first speaker was more along nicotine vaping, and we probably will bring back and have the drugs and alcohol aspect of it as well. And then as well as hall rooming. You walk our halls during class time, you will not see a lot of students roaming around. That has dramatically improved. But our goal is to increase those perceptions, to fix that image that is out there. We have an amazing building of students, and a perception that somebody has of a negative perception, you're building it on less than 1% of a student population. And so it's not what is actually going on in the building, but it is our job to get the proper message out to the community of what is taking place and to work our partnerships with the parent organizations so that they know exactly what's going on in our buildings and the amazing things that we're offering and the outstanding job that our teachers are doing to support students throughout the day. And so, we're looking at that we'll be sending out our PBIS newsletters. Again, our partnerships with the parents, the CEA meetings when they're telling us what's going on. We also are meeting with BEC to make sure that everybody's included on what needs to be improved upon within the high school environment. And I will stop and ask for questions.
I'm a big believer in making the implicit explicit. So you talked a lot about climate and culture. Can you talk more about the climate that you would like for the school? What do you see as the place you're aiming, the place that you're building in this year?
I want an environment that is a safe learning environment for our students, that our students are proud of, that our students feel that they belong in, and that they feel welcome. They feel that, you know, the adults in the building cares for them, that there's somebody that each student connects with, that if there is an issue, because we all have issues, but they have somebody that they can go to that they trust. And I want to make sure that that's what our students feel when they walk our halls. Because, you know, if we're tasked to teach them, you learn from somebody that you know cares from.
As one parent, that resonates with me.
What are some of the things that, I'm sorry.
So
I sit right here, so. Right. What were some of the things that were done to reduce the hall room?
we're in the halls all the time, all the time. I'm rarely in my office. My team's rarely in the office. Our safety team is out there. Even though we're without a contract, our teachers have been amazing. They have been helping. They have been having those conversations. So it's a team effort. And every faculty meeting, we talk about that. It's not just us, like we have to do this together. And they want to see the building improve. And so that's really what it's coming down to. But I don't want to say I take all the credit, because we have great kids. And like I said, when they know you care for them, they listen, they do what they're supposed to do. They want to do what they're supposed to do.
Thank you, Dr. Herman, and thank you for what you just said. They are good kids, and all kids need someone to care about them. Like I said, they want to do the right thing. So I appreciate that. A few slides ago, the different mentoring programs, that meet different types. I might have missed it if you said it. Do they select to be in it? Are they encouraged? Are some of them required? Just curious how that.
So
or a
the
mix.
majority in the Empower Him, Empower Her, they were selected. They were identified as students that needed that love and support. And then there's some that parents came and said, hey, what can you do to help me? And they took them on, they added them to the list. I actually didn't mention the middle one. That is a new program that's being started by students, for students to mentor younger students. The older students, they mentor younger students. So that's getting up and running. They're having meetings. They haven't started the mentoring process yet, but over time, giving them that support and assistance to keep doing what they are doing, that'll slowly be in place as well.
Thank you.
That's, thank you, first of all, this is great. I was also gonna ask about the Panther Advisory Network, because I remember hearing about some plans that some students told us about at a legislative meeting last year, that we were really excited about. I do think that there are opportunities for kids to take advice from peers more willingly than authority figures and just adults in general, especially somebody who has been recently in their shoes as a 9th grader, 10th grader. So I'm thrilled that there's been follow through on that and that that's getting up and running. So
We've had a few meetings already about training the mentors, and then we'll slowly start moving into the next part.
awesome, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Principal
you.
Hammond.
Thank you.
Any questions from the attendance?
Well, thank you so much to our principals that came and presented this evening. You are free to go if you'd like. I understand that, it's been an interesting week with evening conferences as well. So I appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a week.
So our last agenda item for this evening is reviewing some revised draft academic calendars for the 2025-26 year, in particular. So just to revisit what we've been doing in the past few months with the academic calendar committee, which we drew together, we wanted to have a committee that included multiple stakeholders as we were structuring the 25-26 calendar. And we've already met 3 times. We met once in October and twice in November to construct and then respond to feedback regarding the draft academic calendar for the 25-26 school year. At first, when we drew the academic calendar committee together, we intended to plan a 2-year calendar. We pivoted to doing just a 1-year calendar, and I thought it was important to explain why. Where we currently are with the teachers not having a contract is a part of it, because we want to make sure that we are responsive to whatever that may bring in terms of what a new contract may look like. There is always changing guidance from the Pennsylvania Department of Education, particularly because last year in March of 2024, they released all of this new guidance around how you can actually count instructional time instead of school days for purposes of your reporting mechanism for, the amount of time the students spend in school. There has not been a whole lot of clarity provided around that, other than what is called a basic education circular that is not exactly clear. So as I have been talking to my colleagues in different school districts, we've been trying to figure out exactly like, what does this mean and look like, and how do we report it up? And quite honestly, this is going to be the first year that we are reporting under these new guidelines. So we are considering too what that looks like for us. Our current contract with the Cheltenham Educators Association actually requires us to have 181 student days. But with the perspective coming down the pike that we can actually count just the instructional hours instead of the student days, there may be some shifts that we have to make. And just to give you a frame of reference, in the past, we had to actually count the instructional hours and the student days and report that up to the state. So there's a lot going on there just in terms of that movement. And then last but not least, because we have been so meticulous about really codifying the process that we're using, we know we will have a process that we can use moving forward in order to develop, additional academic calendars. So things that we will further consider after this evening's meeting, and we have already scheduled our December meeting, we'd like to actually look at the alignment of the assessment calendar and the report card calendars, as well as our PD calendar, and putting all of those things onto the same calendar so that people can see what the cycle of the school year is up front, and it not being on multiple documents. There is some confusion around that because documents change, obviously, as well as timelines, and making sure that we're laying that out up front is going to be important to really setting the tone for what the school year is and will facilitate with planning forward. And also adding transition days for relevant grades, kindergarten, 5th grade, 7th grade, when you're moving through schools, what does it mean for us to be able to plan proactively for those transitions and put those transition days onto the calendar ahead of time? So we're also going to consider additional feedback, obviously from this evening's meeting, but we sent out a family survey. And the family survey went out this is Cheltenham this past Sunday. The survey does actually, let me pull it up so you can see it. Oops. This is what the survey actually looks like. There are 3 screens to the survey that actually ask the families to answer some questions around what school does your student go to? Are they in a particular grade? How does your student get home after school on early dismissal days? Would changing early dismissal days from Wednesdays to Fridays be an impediment or a problem for your family? And I am happy to say that we have had quite a few family responses already just since Sunday. I went in today and we saw 100 responses. So families are actually responding, which is very, very good and very helpful to us. And also, when we consider that data, we'll be able to figure out too who we really need to speak with. Because for example, the majority, and I would have never thought this, the majority of our responses are actually from high school families at this point. So that means that we might have to explore and investigate further with, elementary school families, and setting up a focus group, for example, might be helpful for that. So we'll be able to use the family survey to, predicate that process. I also reached out to both BEC and CEA, and we will be structuring separate surveys for their membership around the calendar so that we can get their feedback as well. But here's the most important part, I think, to me, making sure that we continue to communicate around this process and then figuring out the best way to actually get the calendar out to the families once the calendar has been voted on by the board. Because at the end of the day, we want families to be able to prepare and to plan around what their academic year needs to look like. And it's going to be incredibly important to get it onto the school district's website timely. Make sure we're sending a color copy home to our families so that they have a paper copy. Making sure that we're putting it into our principals' newsletters as well. How can we communicate this as often as possible so that families will see it and really be aware of what's going on? Last but not least, the revised draft calendar. So based upon the 4 that we presented in October, we actually were able to put together 2 additional drafts. And those 2 drafts, we've coded C1 and D1 because after some surveying and some conversation in the academic calendar committee, draft C and draft D from October kind of rose to the top in terms of the 2 that, people liked the most. And then we took some feedback and we tweaked both of the calendars. And we also updated the counts so that we were sure we were in line with the appropriate student counts. And also we lined up the early dismissal days, PD days, and made sure that each classification of job was appropriately represented in terms of the number of days they're supposed to work each year. An important thing to note about both calendars, they both start on August 25th and they both end on June 12th. We were able to actually get that kind of set and then work with the days in between. The 2 things that are most important, I think, about the 2 most important differences about the calendar.
Siobhan, can you enlarge that?
I can. The 2 things that you're going to want to notice is first in September, you see that September in draft C has a professional development day on the Monday before Rosh Hashanah. In draft D, it does not. Instead, it's a full day and there's an early dismissal day in September to satisfy the need to have faculty meetings. The other thing that's really important is in draft C, you see that there's 3 days of professional learning / in-service development days for teachers at the beginning of the year. But in draft D, you see that there's 4. So that is going to be important as well because that day being moved to August means that there's fewer days through the school year. But that could be a really good thing as well. In draft C, you also say that here, December is actually a week and a half off for winter break into January. In draft D, it's 2 full weeks. So it starts on the 22nd and goes all the way through, it goes all the way through January 2nd. And then last but not least, in draft C, you'll see that you do have your full week of spring break, but the major difference between the 2 in terms of early dismissal days, draft C has, I believe this one is 11. No, this one is 9 early dismissal days. In draft D, you actually have 11 because we had to move the full day professional development day in order to accommodate the number of student days. And that resulted in having extra early dismissal time. So.
Used to get one calendar.
A lot to keep straight, yeah.
Well, I put it on the slide for you.
Yeah, no, it's.
You're looking, is this talking time?
It is talking time.
I first just want to say, I really appreciate how much consideration, how much feedback, and effort has gone into and is ongoing, to include as many stakeholders' voices as possible. And I mean, obviously to just include every possible criteria, that needs to be accounted for in the drafts. That's, I just want to stop there, because like, for me, thank you.
Surely.
Dr. White?
Yes.
Co-sign that. The second thing, I have a slight preference for C, primarily because it makes a little bit more, you get a little bit more learning continuity in the breaks that are different, particularly among like the 22nd in September on C being off, having Rosh Hashanah the next 2 days. That just kind of makes it a little bit more continuous, it feels like. And then having those 2 December days, 2 full weeks off is a lot of time off. And I'm thinking about caregivers who are working as well. That's also a challenge. And so just having even those little extra day and a half in there where they have some more flexibility and there's just more in school time in that month, I think is good. Because we've got a 3-week break coming up, and that's tight already from like how do you dig into a new unit? What are you going to do from a curricular standpoint? So thinking about that just gives a little bit more buffer in the month of December after the new week of break in May.
Mhm.
November.
In
Or
November.
thank you.
November.
Why did I say May? November, correct.
Well, I mean, in
Thanksgiving, I wish
May,
it was May.
wishing it was May, but I think March is an interesting one too, because the introduction of the spring parent-teacher conference
Right.
days made planning very difficult because the students actually are not in school for those days. But for purposes of the CEA contract, we count those as student days.
Mhm.
And then too, like, where do they fit? Where should they actually fall within the school year that it makes sense?
Right.
This made the most sense in terms of A, where our report card conferences typically fall, and B, where we typically see PSSAs. But it's gonna be a struggle because the PSSA timeline shifts as well. So just making sure that all of these things line up, and we're trying to do this as succinctly as possible and predict as much as we can so that we don't have to change the calendar 3 and 4 times before the school year comes.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, just one other comment. I'm so excited about a second report card conference. I am just thrilled for the opportunity for more communication with families, more one-on-one time, more focus on kid progress and how can we maximize the last few months of the school year, really focus. So just like, as a parent, I'm super excited about that. And I love having checkpoints throughout the year for families to really focus on what can I do between now and the next report card conference, as opposed to just, it was nice meeting you and see you on the last day of school,
Right.
So that's really great. I personally, either of these is fine for me. I don't have a preference. Yeah, I think they're either would be great for me.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Quick question. At the beginning, you opened with, doing why we're doing 1 year as opposed to 2 years and, the reasons why. Do you think that in the future, we'll be able to go back to doing 2 years, or do you, okay.
I do. I think we'll be able to go back to doing 2 years when we get further clarity, particularly around the instructional hours piece and how
Okay.
PDE wants us to count that. And when the contracts are kind of settled and we know what we're actually.
That makes sense, yeah. No, great, awesome. I think that there's a few things in here that are a bigger shift for us, not like, like a full week for Thanksgiving versus this is the first year that everyone only had a half day, as we did. I think that families, when you've had kids in the district for a while, there's certain days you can you've always been able to count on having off or not having off. And so some people, the calendar's not out, they're like, well, I know we'll have 2 days off for Rosh Hashanah. I know, you can kind of guess, which if you guess too much, eventually you get burned. So, I mean, I am hopeful, like, it would be awesome if at some point we are able to get beyond a year, but this makes sense to me why we can't this year.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, and the other thing I did not actually elevate, but I do want to note, November 4th, Election Day.
Oh, yeah.
That used to be, well, this year and in previous years, it actually was a professional development day, but we actually use our elementary schools in particular as voting sites. This year, we actually arranged for all of the elementary school teachers to come to Cedar Brook, and then we sent the Cedar Brook teachers over to the high school, because I mean, just the logistics and the mechanism around that, because there's so many, we have such parking restrictions at the
Mhm.
elementary schools. It's very hard to run a professional development day when teachers can't be in their own buildings.
Is the primary election day like that then as well, or is that one still a,
The primary
Will
election
still
day,
be
we
a
kept as a
PD day.
professional
it's
development
usually a
day.
lighter one? Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
And
I'm curious.
it's definitely lighter in
Yeah.
terms of like,
Yeah.
so we figured that that would be more reasonable, especially, you know, just what we saw with the election this year.
Absolutely.
November 4th definitely can be a thing.
Awesome. No, that makes sense.
It also creates an opening for people to volunteer
Yeah.
and participate in our democracy.
And we talked about that in the academic calendar committee, like in terms of like, what do we value as a community? We're seeking justice and really trying to give people the opportunity to live our vision and our mission. Like, what do we do with election day?
Yep.
So.
No, good. I just realized, you said this, and I'm trying to remember what it is. When does this come back to us to vote in December? Or,
Absolutely, and that's on my next slide, so.
oh, sorry,
Oh, perfect.
I jumped ahead.
So because I have a slide here.
Sorry.
For December, we're gonna gather the additional feedback that you've given us tonight and take a look at all the surveys and then the focus groups that we run. We're gonna come back together and kind of finalize a final draft. Because part of the survey that we send out to the families and that we'll send out to our union membership is we actually, similar to what you just did tonight, they'll see both drafts and they're choosing one over the other. I will tell you that right now, based upon what I'm seeing in the data, draft B is actually in the lead. Which I wouldn't have expected, right? But again, taking people's feedback and making sure that they're seeing something that they can kind of think about and then plan for is really important. So the plan is to have a final draft for the board for the December legislative meeting.
For the survey, what sample size are you looking for to get good data?
Because we have so many families, we have 4,300 children at this point. We were thinking about a sample size of 20%.
Okay.
So I can't do that in my head because it's late. How many?
860.
860 kids, but that's
860
That's-
kids.
Could be 700.
that's like
families.
500 families. maybe.
500 families, because that's the other thing that we requested. We've actually set the survey up so the families could fill out one survey
Yes.
per household
Right.
instead of filling out multiple
I
surveys per
can't
child.
wait it. I have 3 kids.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that was
You get
one
one
of the parents actually raised that in the academic calendar committee, like,
No, it's a fair question.
yeah, like, I don't want to fill this out 3 times.
Right.
So, it definitely, made sense to do it that way. I'm just hopeful that everybody feels as though they have a voice in this process and we can settle on something as a community that actually makes sense.
Right.
Yep.
So.
Any questions for the community? Present?
I have a question.
Yes. Could you please tell us your name and where you reside in the district?
Yeah, my name is Lakita Farley, and I emailed, because I was a little confused about the calendar situation where I'm new to the district. And then my daughter goes to Myers Elementary, so I wanted a little bit more understanding about like the difference between because it's kind of hard to see maybe from my like vantage point between like the 2 calendars, the difference in the professional development days. Is there going to be, if you could speak to like, is there going to be some type of like, I guess, community? I love that you have like focus groups and some things like that, but is the community going to be made aware of like what the results are, or is it just going to be at the board meeting?
Oh, absolutely. And it'll be at the board meeting because at the board meeting, my plan would be to actually present the results of the survey as part of this, because the results of the surveys will actually feed into, which calendar we end up presenting as the final. So I think that that's going to be a big part of it. Because the other thing we have to consider is, we're surveying families now. We're also going to survey our teachers with a different type of survey, and then our school support staff, our paraprofessionals, our kindergarten aides, our secretaries, with a different type of survey, because we're interested in their voice as well. Because the one thing that came out of this is sometimes we don't think about planning in a way that facilitates the best staff attendance. So how are we including them so they can flag for us ahead of time, like, yeah, Wednesdays is not great, but Fridays is, or Fridays are not great, but Wednesday is. Like, what does that look like? and making sure that they have a say in this as well.
Okay. And in terms of like the count, like if you could go to draft G for a second.
Yes.
So what is the reason why this one has like 11? If you could, maybe I'm like not understanding. That one has 11 professional development days and that
Yes.
one has 9.
Correct.
Are these full days of professional development? Or are these the half day dismissal?
Actually, we have 11 early dismissal days on
Oh,
this
early
calendar.
dismissal days.
Yeah, so
Okay.
both calendars actually have 9 days of professional development.
Okay.
The big difference is the placement of those professional development days. So here, we actually place professional development up front, so the full days are before the kids even started. And that resulted in us having to add those 2 half-day professional development days so that we capture student attendance. And within our teacher's contract, we are required to have time for teachers to have faculty meetings with their principals. By moving that professional development day, we had to actually add half days so that the faculty meetings could be held.
Okay.
Yeah, so for September in particular, in the other calendar, you see this is a full day here.
Okay.
We would have had the faculty meeting on that full day professional development day.
Okay.
With us not having a full day professional
Those are
development
half
day. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And I mean, at least I'm happy to see there's not like 2 or 3 a month, at least something.
We talked about that extensively.
Yeah, that has been I'm coming from New York and I've been a teacher for 13 years. It was a tremendous issue for me coming here. And wasn't aware. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, a big cost issue. How about that?
Yeah.
That's probably-
Yeah, because the other thing that is in the survey and that we added, and I checked with Right at School, was around the cost.
Yeah.
What does it actually cost now with Right at School for our families to have to pay for childcare on these half days?
Right.
And for some of the families, Right at School is an expensive program. And, we have to be cognizant of that as well. So thank you. I'm glad you came. Thank you for coming.
I mean, there's a lot to consider. I'm sorry. Again,
So is Henry.
there's a lot to consider, but I do like the professional development days. That seems to be real reasonable, doesn't add to those early dismissal days, and you catch the teachers when they're fresh.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I can't wait to see what the survey says.
Yeah.
Because I think the winter break is going to be a topic of discussion because people travel. And the Thanksgiving break was definitely a topic of discussion too, because yesterday was a half day for our students. And in a lot of our schools, we did a lot of PBIS because instructionally, kids were already checked out.
Right.
They were just like not at it.
If they were there.
If they were there. And
Sure, attendance.
Yes, and our attendance was way, way down.
Right.
I was actually covering Epic and our attendance was way, way down. It was really
I know
interesting.
some families who have to basically plug kids with family members, over the weekend for Monday afternoon, Tuesday, Wednesday, so that they've got coverage while they're still working during that week.
Right.
And then pick them back up for Thanksgiving, kind of a thing, and just cost prohibitive to have them home for Monday morning, so,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, do we have any additional questions?
Seeing none.
Oh. I did just. There are no snow days included in this, right?
There are not. Well, yes and no. Let me back up, be clearer. What we can do if we actually have to take inclement weather days back are take back parent-teacher conference days. So instead of us tacking on to the end of the year, we might take back, if, for example, if we had a freak blizzard in November, we could take back one of those parent-teacher conference days or rainfall. And at that point, that will require board action to delineate a change in the calendar for those purposes.
Okay. Or we would have the option to do
Flexible
a
instruction.
virtual day.
Yes,
potentially.
and that process requires us to actually apply for and be approved by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, flexible instruction days. And that application goes in the spring. And it is pretty extensive. We have to actually give them samples of lesson plans. We have to explain what our structure would be and what our logistics are. So we will be prepared this year to file the application. Once we file the application, it gives us a 3-year window to use.
Thank you. Just wanted to confirm.
Seems like this winter, we only have to worry about heat waves.
Because it's very hot.
Not a lot of, not a lot of snow.
All right, no questions? May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So
Second.
What is adjourned?
Thank you so much.
thank you.
You.